Now, the president has joined the director of the military office at the White House in expressing regret that a backup Air Force One flew dangerously low over lower Manhattan yesterday with 2 fighter jets in tow for a photo op, while an internal memo from the Federal Aviation Administration indicates the FAA was aware in advance of the possibility of public concern over the publicity flight, but still insisted on everybody keeping it secret. In our number 1 story, one blogger is really mad about this. He will join me in a moment. His name is Brian Williams. Today, the Defense Department calling the stunt an unfortunate flight and a mishandled, misguided mission. Very nice. Alliterative. One administration official admitting to the Associated Press the purpose of said mission was to update the file photos of the president's plane near the Statue of Liberty, and that the photo op was combined with a training exercise to save money, which would have been dandy if anybody had been forewarned in New York. Many of the people were witnesses to, even survivors of 9/11. Now the defense secretary says he didn't know in advance. Yesterday, the mayor of New York said the same thing. Police sources said they did, but were warned by the FAA not to warn anybody else. And the president?
It was a mistake, as was stated. It was something we found out about along with all of you, and it will not happen again.
The director of the White House military office, Louis Caldera, yesterday got chewed out by Rahm Emanuel, then assumed public responsibility for this. A similar flyover was for Washington, D.C. was scheduled for next week. That has now been canceled. What about Caldera? Has he been canceled?
I think the president has rightly asked that a review of the situation and the decision making be undertaken so that we can have a better understanding of why that decision might have been made.
Is the firing a potential outcome of that review?
I think our course would be to conduct the review before something like that's determined.
And WCBS Television in New York has tonight obtained an internal memo from the FAA in which it claims the agency, quote, demanded total secrecy from the NYPD, the FBI, and even the mayor's office, and threatened federal sanctions if the secret got out. This even though James Johnston, an FAA air traffic control official, is quoted as writing, the possibility of public concern regarding DoD, Department of Defense, aircraft flying at low altitudes in and around New York City. As promised, the anchor and managing editor of NBC News, Brian Williams. Good evening, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You say this often enough, opinions are not your side of the street. This isn't your business, and yet you were very, very emphatic in your blog, The Daily Nightly, about this issue. Why?
This was the clunkiest thing I've seen done in years, and I think from the distance of Washington, it was hard to tell just what it did to people in lower Manhattan. If they ever release the 911 calls, you'll hear it. People taking it upon themselves to evacuate buildings, spill into the streets. It was just enormously klutzy and ill-conceived. The head of the White House military office, I flew with this air wing covering President Clinton, been thousands of hours on that aircraft and gotten to know their procedures. I'm quite convinced that no one in the White House knew about this. They're their own operation. He's Harvard-educated, West Point educated. He's been a law professor. He's run the Army, but he is squarely in the spotlight for this.
Well, as you wrote, someone should pay for this. Is it him? Does somebody have to pay for it with a job?
Well, I'll leave that up to the boss and the president today, obviously appointing the deputy chief of staff to run the investigation. One of the points I made on my blog, I couldn't believe they didn't make this a virtue. Say to folks in New York, and we're good at getting the word out, the web's really good at it. Mary-Kate Olsen can order a latte at 4, and we know about it at 4:05 on Gawker. So we're pretty good at telling folks, come out Saturday morning, Battery Park, for those of you in Jersey, Liberty State Park, bring the kids, bring your camera. You're going to see a once-in-a-lifetime picture of Air Force One making a low pass near the Statue of Liberty. Make it an event. Instead, it was cloaked in this automatic, don't ask any questions, post-9/11 secrecy, an empty 747. We were so fearful that the wrong element would find out we were flying an empty plane over New York. We forgot to tell the right element.
Exactly.
That would be you and me.
And what about this newly uncovered memo over Mr. Johnston's signature at the FAA acknowledging the possibility of public concern, but still insisting on secrecy? This means that somebody made an equation that what they're getting now was better than somehow letting the right people, as you suggest, know.
That's why I think the higher-ups are so angry. This kind of thing, if you know the workings of government, something like a military air wing never bubbles up to the boss bosses, but they have to take responsibility. They get the responsibility. This is an enormous quality of life issue here in New York. I spoke to a gathering of firefighters the other night here in Midtown, and in the quiet of that ballroom, 9/11, as I said that night, was 10 minutes ago.
Of course.
10 minutes ago. It's so fresh. They lost 343 of their members who went in to help those who'd been already hit. It was just 10 minutes ago. You can't trifle with feelings in Lower Manhattan.
And to even bring it to a larger point, which I don't think has been made yet, so what if it's New York? It could have been Washington. They had one planned for Washington.
Yep.
Could have been the Sears Tower in Chicago, which we always hear mentioned about. Would the reaction have been different but yet similar if it had been another location rather than just, oh, it's New York again?
Well, the Chicago comparison, L.A., they haven't heard, happily for them, they don't know the sound of a squealing jet engine before impact. Part of what was so bracing about yesterday was to see a jet that large on a severe angle wing up the way you never see a commercial airliner handling. Say nothing of the fighter that appeared to be chasing the jetliner. As I said yesterday, it was harrowing if you saw it from a distance. The only thing worse was seeing it up close, realizing, oh my God, those are the markings of Air Force One. Is the president on board? You know, is something wrong here? Or tell me it's a Harrison Ford movie.
As it turned out, we could have been told in advance it virtually was. The anchor and managing editor of NBC Nightly News, Brian Williams, thanks for visiting us here at your alma mater.
Thanks for having me.